This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Mettle Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Hello, and welcome to the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Thomann. And I am here today. We're going to get into a little bit of specifics on some of the stuff I do working with coaches specifically. I do professional development with coaches in which I help them learn how to better understand what mental toughness is, how it's developed, and how they can share that with athletes. And my guest today is a coach I've worked with. It's Ryan Hamilton, the head coach of White House football in White House, Tennessee. And the reason I have to talk about this before he comes in, because he jumps right into it. He's so excited about some of the stuff we're doing. He starts talking about this equation, and he talks about this metaphor I do. And if you have no idea what he's talking about, you might get lost. So I'm going to show you just briefly a little bit of the metaphor and the equation he's talking about that I do when I'm working with coaches about developing mental toughness. Now, this is not the full seminar. This is not the full explanation. If you want that, get a hold of me and we'll talk about how I can come in and work with your coaches, your athletes. But I say that because it might need a little bit more explanation than what I'm able to get here in this podcast. But I'm going to go through it very, very quickly and give you an idea so you know what he's talking about. And if you are listening and you're not on YouTube, you might jump over to YouTube so you can see the graphic I'm going to show here that's going to explain a little bit better, because, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this metaphor that he's talking about, which is the thing about this, is I am a former teacher, and now I'm a coach, and coaches love metaphors. And when I was a teacher, I was a science teacher. So I would work with equations and stuff like that. I used to teach a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of physics. So all this stuff, me combining a metaphor, mental toughness, turning it into a metaphor and turning it into an equation, a scientific equation, is the most me thing I can think of. But that's the way my brain works. And if you know me, you're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Trust me, I won't lose you too much, because it's the easiest equation known to man, the one that we all know. And that is the combustion equation, in which we have a spark. We add a spark to fuel and oxygen, and we get heat. And once we do that, we get CO2 and H2O in our exhaust. Everybody knows that, right? You add, oxygen and gasoline to your car, and you have you add a little spark. You get heat, you get motion, and then, of course, you get exhaust coming out the back end. And we know that when we build a campfire, right, we have firewood, and as long as we have to blow on it to get it going, we get a spark, we know we get some heat, and we get some, exhaust coming off. We get the smoke and all that. So we know this equation. So I took that really simple equation and I call it the mental toughness metaphor, and how to build mental toughness. And just to explain how I turn those together, to me, the spark is motivation. You have to have at least some motivation. All right. But motivation, I don't think motivation does much beyond the spark. I think motivation runs out. Like if you're starting to, you want to go run, a motivation runs out about mile 1, right? You got to have some other stuff to drive you, and long-term programs and things like that. You have to have the motivation to get started, but you have to have other things to help build. Motivation's fleeting. The second part is fuel. And to me, the fuel is confidence and belief. You have to have some confidence and belief to be able to start to grow. Now, we may have kids and adults that don't start with very much. They have very, very little, but that's the part of the trick of this, is to be able to have them recognize it and use that. And then we add oxygen to our fuel and our spark, And in this metaphor, in this equation, adversity is the oxygen. So let me put that together. You got a little bit of motivation. You got it with just a little bit of confidence and belief, and you add just a little bit of adversity, and you start to build the fire, the mental toughness fire, right? And obviously, the more confidence and belief you have, the more adversity you can add to it, the bigger your fire gets, right? And when you do that, you're going to get more heat. And when we have more heat in this equation, in this metaphor, heat is growth. That's what we're looking for, right? The mental toughness fire helps us grow. And then just like our fire, our mental toughness fire, just the metaphor of any fire is we get a little bit of exhaust. And in this metaphor, the exhaust is stress, right? You can you can have all the confidence in the world. You can be putting yourself through all these things, but the more growth you have, the more you put into yourself and do this, likely the more stress you're going to have, right? And you have to learn how to deal with that. And this is all part of the program. So he's going to be talking about this, and he's going to be talking about adding adversity, and he's going to be talking about venting the stress. Coach Hamilton's going to mention this stuff. And I was like, I have to at least show you guys what this stuff means so that you can understand where he's coming from at least. And as you see, if you're listening on YouTube, I skipped a lot of the presentation there, just clicked, but that's part of it, right? Like I don't have time for all of that right now. If you have more, if you're like, hey, this sounds kind of cool, I build into this metaphor for, I can go so many ways with this, and it's really cool. But here's the equation. Again, you have the motivation, you add it to some confidence and belief, you add some adversity, and you start to build a fire. That gives us the growth that we're looking for in an athlete or a human, just even ourselves. But we also have the stress, and we have to learn how to vent that stress a little bit. We do that with some meditation and some mindfulness and things like that. And it's a really good metaphor and a really good idea on how we can build mental toughness in athletes rather than just complaining about how soft they are, right? And that's the whole point. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of an idea on what he's talking about here. So, you know, if you want to learn more, contact me. I'd love to share more of this idea with you. So let's get into the interview with Coach Hamilton of White House Football. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. And welcome back to the Mental Mettle Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm here with my guest today, Coach Ryan Hamilton, or as when I talk to people in the area and I'm like, hey, I know Coach Hamilton, and they look at me and they go, oh, you mean Coach Hammy? And I'm like, okay, yeah, Coach Hammy. So the cool thing about Coach Hamilton is, and we'll get into how we got to know each other a little bit and how we ran into each other, but I like where you're at right now, you're about a quarter mile down the city's greenway. So it's cool for me. I'm new to the area, but then I got connected into the White House High School, and it's really cool. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, you bet. So give me a little bit of background. I know that you're originally from the Nashville area, but you played ball at White House High School, you coached here, and now you're the head coach. So give me a little bit of background about, what is White House football?
Yes, sir. Like you said, we moved up here from East Nashville when I was probably 15, 16 years old. Got to attend White House. One of my cousins went here and played for Coach Porter, Coach Grantham, Coach Honeycutt, a lot of great coaches that had been here for a long time. Graduated 2001, was able to come back as a volunteer in 2005 and work with Coach Porter and all the coaches that coached me. And, from moving from East Nashville to this place and graduating and being able to come back, it really is a special place. I always believe that. Did great things for me. The coaches did great things for me. And really one of the reasons I got into coaching was because of my high school coaches and this place, being able to instill into young men what I got out of it. There's a lot of homegrown people in the community, man. It's a special community, but not being from here, I think you kind of have a little different appreciation and a big respect for it.
Yeah. So, it's funny that you say that not being here, right? Because you're talking about, I mean, but you still also, you moved in when you were 15, right?
Right.
Yeah.
A lot older now. So I guess now you say I'm here, been here the whole time, maybe.
Yeah.
That's part of growing up.
Yeah. And when you mentioned Coach Porter, I did a little research here. I didn't realize he was there for 32 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
he was here with Coach Grantham. Several great coaches come through here. Coach Dawson, Coach Short had a stint here. The longtime Gallatin coach who just recently passed. Coach Honeycutt was here for a long time. Coach Lambert is still here. He coached football for a long time here. A lot of great coaches, kind of come through, but most of them stuck together for a long time. That 30 years is unheard of nowadays.
Well, yeah, and when you're talking about all these coaches, you're not talking about all various head coaches. You're talking about just the staff was there for that long.
Right. Yes, sir. And even attending school, I always looked at it as, the baseball coach, Tony Long, all the coaches were like a family. When you walk down the hallways, they'd cut up with you. They'd cut up with each other. And it was a cool dynamic as a kid, kind of like a second family, whether they actually coached in your sport or just in the hallway with you. You knew you could look up to them and ask for advice or information. And, they'd always be there to help you.
Yeah. So you took over from Coach Porter, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that was what year? What was your first year?
Gosh, I think I just finished year 5, but I came back as a volunteer and I got hired on in 2008, and a lot of the same coaches were still here. So I got to work with them, and you can't find a better human being than Coach Porter. Everything that he's built here over the years, and man, just a phenomenal man to learn from, and humongous shoes to fill. And the biggest thing is just don't screw it up.
Well, there's an old when I was an AD and we're hiring guys, and I was coaching for a while. We'd always say one of the things that we'd always joke around is never follow a legend, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that had to weigh on you a little bit.
Oh yeah, it did. And Coach Porter is a great person, great man. Taught me a lot of things, and we still to this day can communicate, and the things and the way that he did things and how he handled different situations is just a lot of life lessons and everything that he did and taught me, and I'm real appreciative and thankful of him.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm interested about coaches, I think that whenever you follow a legend, you follow somebody's been there, the kids that you get your first year, you've been here just a few years now, right? But those kids don't care, right? No. That you played for Coach Porter, that Coach Porter. It's and you step in and you don't get the respect that he had, and you can't. It's funny. It's I'm going to do everything the same way Coach Porter did and whatever, but you don't necessarily have that latitude.
Right.
Which is,
and it's different. Even because luckily I coached here with him, so that the transition still knew some of the kids, but obviously I'm not Coach Porter, and things are different and everything. And that respect level that you're talking about are two different things. But it's funny because we kind of had a running joke with Coach Porter about when he would talk to the team and tell stories. I mean, he'd been here for 30 years and done amazing things. Yes, you want to preach that. And then the kids, like you said, even when I step in, when I played for, the legend Coach Porter and, all these people, they don't care. It's a different time, I guess. And it's kind of leading into maybe where we're going with all this, and things are different. They're not the same. And it's finding a way.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple reasons that things are different, and you're right. That's how we got connected, is because you're hey, the kids aren't the same, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. One, everybody knows, since COVID, since social media, since all these things are different. But also, you are not coaching the same high school in the same town that Coach Porter did.
Right.
White, like, if anybody's not listening to this and isn't, I got a lot of people from Illinois that pay attention and all over the place, but White House is just north of Nashville, Tennessee. And you tell me, what's the population change in the last 10 years for White House, Tennessee?
Oh, gosh. Obviously it's grown tremendously. Like, I can't got no numbers or anything like that, but I mean, we're definitely.
I mean, we're talking more than doubled, right?
Oh, easy.
Easy. It's probably closer to tripled, and it's just in one of the biggest, fastest growing areas in the country near Nashville, which means that, like, even if you did say, "Hey, I'm a disciple of Coach Porter, and I'm going to do it like Coach Porter did," and more than half of your parents are like, "Who's Coach Porter?" Right. Like, so it doesn't mean anything to them. Right. Yeah.
But it's definitely a lot of growth around here, and different demographics and things like that. And it's definitely opened our eyes to things are different, and obviously being surrounded by a good support staff and everything else always helps, which we've got a lot of people that are still alumni of the school here.
Right. And I think that's what we're getting into is that's how I met you. I did a professional development program for Sumner County. A lot of, I don't know, maybe we had 100 coaches there, right? And we're talking about, we're doing my stuff on Ember to Inferno, all talking about mental toughness and what mental toughness actually is, how you can develop with your athletes. And I remember, I don't remember how we got connected, but you were like, "Hey, I want you to come work with more of my coaches." And that's what you said. It was because kids are different. You recognize that, which meant you felt like you had to handle the kids a little bit different.
Right.
Not everybody feels that way. A lot of people will say, "Hey, kids are different," but they're like, "That's the kids' problem," right?
Yeah, I think there is I don't know if it's a running saying or something that a lot of people kind of, you get caught up in, and like, man, kids are just different. They don't treat things the same way. They don't respect, and we never really take the time. Like, from a coaching standpoint, at the end of every season, there's a reflection time, and I don't think a lot of times people spend time reflecting on how the town has changed, how the world has changed, how COVID changes, how, like, everything is different. And then when you came in and spoke at the professional development, and we talked about how cell phones, I'm not blaming everything on cell phones, but with the big crucial times of a kid's brain development and what they have access to, like, really opened my eyes to, like, wow, that's a key piece that I'm missing when I'm trying to relate to the kids, and what we're trying to see and figure out to reach the kids better, to get them to understand something. Like, this is a direction or a road that I want to go down to try to learn more about, or open my eyes even more to where we can be better teachers, more effective with our kids, and what we need to be having their eyes open to.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the point, is whenever you're right, when we talk about kids are different, and people, I mean, coaches, parents, we always say, well, it's kids these days, they're always this, and here's the problem, and here's the problem. Well, that cell phone's not going anywhere. Social media is not going anywhere. It's like, so we can sit here, and go, like, if you want, you can identify the problem if you want, but that doesn't help. Like, we're not doing anything about that. Right. So I think it's more about helping the kids gain the tools to be able to deal with the way that life is now. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know what? That's hard, Coach. That means I have to do something.
Exactly. Like, I got to find the mirror, and then I got to look into it and see what happens after that.
Yeah. So we got together, and I did a few sessions working with just your team. I say not your team, but your some of your coaches, right? And I'd love for you to talk to me about what you got out of that, what you're implementing, and what you're seeing in the kids.
Absolutely. The cool thing, we met in the mornings, and we touched on the Ember to Inferno, and kind of the equation of the oxygen and everything, and putting the spark in there and finding the motivation. So as we were going through that, we were in the off season as a football team. So it's like, as fresh as the information was coming to us, we were trying to apply it with our players. So we kind of did like a question of the week to get them identify like what's going on inside of them, what inner voice do they use, what has changed over the last year or two in their life that has affected them, with the game of football, with school, with anything. And it was really insightful to us, or to me, when I think back of how I was coached and when I first got into coaching. I coached like the coaches that coach me. And in today's world, with everything, kind of opening our eyes to the kids perceive things different, maybe don't spend as much time on certain things or think they should have it instantly. Like, that's the problem. I can sit there and complain, kind of like you said, but hey, I'm in the thick of it, and this is what I got. How do I move forward? There's got to be that oxygen, that release, and everything that we can go out and still keep this fire burning for why we're doing what we're doing and still make that same difference. So we did the questions of the week with our kids as we went through this, and it really opened my eyes to the kids, what they listen to, their positive voice, that inner voice, and like how it affects them on the field, and where we could show film of situations that we went through the year before. Like, hey, this is, kind of what we're talking about, where we can kind of change and start practicing new strategies and relearn, like you said, you can retrain the brain or the pathways for things to go, and just open your eyes to that, like, makes a big difference when you're aware of the situation.
Man, there's so much. I hope we don't lose people there, because you're really getting into the whole thing that I do and that. And I know that most people don't know what we're talking about on this thing, but I think the idea here is, just to sum up what we're saying, is, and what you mentioned there, is everybody knows, or everybody's pretty clear, that kids aren't quite as mentally tough as they used to, whether for whatever reason. They've been through a lot, honestly, through the COVID and through social media and things like that. But then they come to us and we know they're not quite as mentally tough as kids used to be. And then we hit them with all this adversity, and make things really hard, which is how you get better. But it might be too much, too fast. And honestly, and this is, I don't know how people feel about it when I look at it this way, but when you're a coach, you should be there to serve the kids.
Right. We're teachers.
You're teachers. And if you are just pushing them away and saying you're soft, we don't want that kid on that team anyway. He's not. He's not one of my. He's not a kid. Yeah. He can't play for me, right? Yeah. It's not for you. It's for them. And so, I'm all about putting adversity on kids and making things hard. But I think you have to do it in the right way to help them grow.
Right. And the thing too is to understand the adversity they're already going through. We're, like I said, the different demographics and everything else, and like what the actual kid goes through when he leaves, and like all those things, and how you're playing a role. Are you making those situations better or worse? Is he ever going to let his guard down to receive the information that you have? And like, I think those barriers, man, are huge if you don't recognize them. If you think it's your way or the highway, like I don't see that surviving.
No. And I see that's the trick, is like, and this isn't easy. This is the job of a coach, but to have kids come into your program, push them as hard as you can, but have them enjoy it and have this be a place they want to be. Right. Mm-hmm. I think any coach could bring them in and say, "Oh, we're going to push you through it." Right. But they also might hate it. Right. And that's, I don't think that's overly helpful.
Right. And it goes back to the controllables of, like, I can lead you to the water or whatever, but I can't make you drink it. Like, eventually, like, I can try to even give you salt tablets if you want. Like, eventually they're going to have to make that decision to let the guard down, to open up, to understand that we do care as coaches. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that relationship of, like, man, I do care about your situation more than just the game of football or, this class or whatever it is. It's bigger than that.
Yeah, I say it all the time with a coach. Like, you can push kids. Kids are more resilient than we think, right? Kids, you can push kids. You can put a lot on them. You can ask a lot of them. But whatever level of pressure you're putting on them, that level of love has to be right there with them. You can't, if it's off, they don't care about what you say or what you're trying to do.
They'll move on to the next thing or scroll to the next video.
That's right.
Yeah.
I want to go into the point that you're talking about. You're talking a group of high school football players. You're sitting in a room with them, talking to them about identifying their negative voice, their positive voice, how they talk to each other. At first, it has to be a little bit awkward, and they're like, "What is he to? What is Coach? Is this still Coach Hammy? Like, what are we talking about here?" Right?
Oh yeah. And it's funny you say it like that because I mentioned I coach different now than the way I used to coach or anything like that, and the kids kind of see it. And the coolest part about that, it's awkward as all get out when you first introduce it or when you first start talking about it. But when the kid sees you, like, hey, you're trying, like you want to be the best version of yourself. And when they see you admit your mistakes, and they've seen your mistakes as whatever, the way you talk to them or anything like that. And when you become that vulnerable state with them, like now it kind of levels the playing field and it gives you back that care, that level of love. And I'm still going to push you. Like, I still want the same goals that I've always wanted, but like, we're going to work together to get there. It's not going to be you listen to me and we go. It's, hey man, let's talk. Let's find a way for both of us to be successful here. So in like opening the door to, like, when you gave us the sheet to answer questions about ourselves, and I tell the kids that, like, I'd give them, hey man, you ever heard me in practice be sarcastic? And that was one of my things there, was like sarcasm is one of my, I guess, defense mechanisms or whatever.
Yeah.
And they were like, absolutely. Yeah. I said, guys, we just talked about the negative voice inside of you, and then now my sarcasm is a negative. Like, this isn't math. We're not making a positive with these two things.
No.
We have to be able to address that and fix these things.
And I've worked with a lot of teams, and I can tell you, it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter boys, girls, whatever. If we do something like this, the first time we do it, it's awkward. People are laughing.
Yeah.
They're like joking around. And so, I mean, but that starts to fade, right? And I always lean into it. I'm like, hey, this is going to be awkward. And they're like, oh, it's supposed to feel awkward. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're thinking things in a different way. It's going to be a little bit awkward. The fact that you go into your team and talk to them about what you did and some of the vulnerabilities that you had to come in, that has to resonate with some of the kids.
It does. And I can tell a big difference, like to ease the awkwardness or whatever. And like, one thing I'm understanding, or my opinion more or less, is it's hard to get these kids to talk to each other.
Yeah.
It's hard to get kids to talk in a group. It's not the norm. It's not the dynamic anymore. Whatever it is, I'm not wrong, right, or indifferent. But when you're able to tell your side of the story or your things or be vulnerable that way, you can kind of get them to let the guard down a little bit and maybe even open up about kind of where they're at and, things you never really thought about. And it really helps. And it changed, I think, the way the kids kind of look at me and the way that I look at coaching in general.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things you mentioned there is talking about seeing film. I think that putting this together with doing film is just so useful, because a lot of film, I mean, I don't know about you, but I know most of the film that I did or when I was playing, coaches love to pick out what we did wrong a little bit more than what we did right.
Oh yeah.
So I think that part of the benefit of talking about the negative voice and the positive voice is being able to look at film and say, okay, we're picking out what we need to get better at, but we don't want this to be a negative conversation. We want this to be a positive conversation about what we need to work on and what we need to improve on.
Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing of like identifying, what are you thinking here before the play starts based off this look, to where I need to know how to better instruct you to either think this or to get you to step that way. Like, I need to change what I'm telling you or showing you for you to understand this. And I think a lot of them, where like what you mentioned was coaches, not that they were doing it intentionally, but the embarrassment or humiliation by pointing on the negative plays, did that really teach me to do the play right? Or did that teach me to, like, hey man, don't speak up, don't say nothing,
right?
Just sit here. Like, what did we really gain out of that? And when you're looking at trying to be the best version or to create growth in your locker room. So changing over into that, like, hey man, talk to me about what you understand about this play, what you don't understand about this play, and let's see if we can find, some things to move over to the positive side.
Or did all they picked up from it was coaches being a jerk?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
the old school way, and I'm guilty as anybody of, putting the laser on the screen and circling and pointing out what are we doing and asking those dumb, they're rhetorical because if the kid responds back, you're going to, please respond back because I'm going to light you up on this one.
Yeah.
I learned that way. I felt like that was the norm for me. And like, I just didn't want to do those things because I didn't want to get embarrassed.
Yeah.
I didn't really understand, past that, where it's going to take me and what it's going to do for me. I think that's kind of where we're at.
Mental Mettle Coaching is driven by a passion for sharing knowledge and experience that will allow athletes and coaches to grow, play, and live in a positive way. We offer a range of coaching and professional development services. First and foremost, we offer individual mental coaching for athletes, and it's easily the most efficient and effective way to help athletes replace fear and anxiety with positivity and confidence. Mental Mettle Coaching has helped middle school setters to high school lacrosse middies to D1 offensive linemen. If you have an athlete that needs to improve their mindset in athletics, mental coaching is the answer. We also offer team coaching, which uses the same concepts as individual mental coaching, but applies them in a group setting. Team bonding outings are great, but they do nothing to address the thoughts and feelings that can derail a team. Team coaching does address that, and it's a great option for helping your team grow. Finally, Mental Mettle Coaching offers social, emotional learning, professional development programs for educators and coaches. There are self-paced online programs, there are virtual coaching options, and even in-person seminars available. This PD will help increase the mental health of your staff and eventually your student athletes and the culture of your school. All of the Mental Mettle Coaching programs have the same goal. Our mission is to help athletes and coaches develop a resilient and spirited mindset that will help them confidently face any obstacles or challenges they seek, regardless of their situation. If you would like to see the same in your athlete, your team, and your staff, contact Coach Thomann for more information. Yeah, no, I think, I don't know. I think that there's probably people listening to it that are like, I don't know. Oh, you're just talking. Old school's better. Old school's better. And you guys are being soft
it's effective. Like it was effective. It worked for me. I understand it. I get it. I'm not saying I'm, giving everybody a blanket and a bottle. Like, we're still running and, doing things that we did and before. But
I think that it's
the relationship piece with a kid is going to go a lot further.
Yeah, I agree. When you say it's effective, like coaching negative, and even when we talk to ourselves, like if we're talking about, I always say that if I want to beat myself up, let's say I'm trying to do a workout or I'm trying to go for a run and I'm like, that's not good enough, Matt. You got to do this. And I'm negative, negative, negative. I do think it can be a good short-term motivator. Yeah. Right. But I think it comes at a penalty. I think that it eventually starts to wear on your mental health if you're constantly beating yourself up. And I think that a lot of times when you're a high school coach working with kids for, you might get them for 4 years, but they may only be really under you for a couple. Well, a lot of times they can survive that for a couple years. But what are they coming out with? That's the problem, right?
Yeah. What are they leaving with, and how is it changing the classes below them? Because one of the greatest advice is like problems don't leave when that kid graduates. The problems are still there, and it's another 4-year problem because it's still there.
Yeah,
and, other kids saw it, and it's still there.
Yeah. So you mentioned briefly, and something I talk about it that you really picked up on is that idea of neuroplasticity, and we're changing the way we think in different situations. And I've done some podcasts on this and talked to people about it, but it is literally about being able to feel things like see things differently in old situations, right? So it's like this is like, I'm going to line up. We're trying to get a kid to line up against, and play football and be like, I'm worried about this happening or this thing happening, or what if this happens? What if this happens? And we're trying to change that mindset into, I'm very positive about my abilities and what I can do and what I need to do and what I can control. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it is a slow process though.
It is. And you have to talk it that way a long time. It's like breaking a habit. It's, quitting something, whatever it is. Like, you have to be intentional about the way that you address it, the way that you look at it. And like, it's hard work to get to that point with a player, with a kid. And like, not to speak on, I guess, what everybody else thinks too, like, it's different. You have transfers and you have NILs, and like, you want to say that old school coaching is the best way, and now they're forking out money and giving people, exactly what they want, or they're not coming. Like, what are we really doing?
Oh, it's a different, even all the way down to high school, it's a different landscape.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah.
So they're going to go to the next high school and get what they want.
Yeah. Which is a tough situation, which means you got to be like, I think it makes it even more important for you to build relationships. Yeah. And kids like, I don't want to leave this place because this guy, I feel good when I'm here. Yeah. And he's pushing me, and we have a connection. And I think this is a good way to do it now.
Right. They care, and they're making me better, like, inside.
Yeah. What are you doing? I know do you have specifics you're doing with your team now that are new since we've started worked a little?
We do. We're in spring practice now, going in the morning, so they're not real happy with me or really anybody, because we're getting them up early and then we're making them lift weights in the afternoon. But as we were going through our process with you and doing the question of the week, we had a beginning of the week and an end of the week, like a check-in, check-out, where we could sit there and try to, whatever question that we gave them about the inner voice, screen time, whatever we were trying to find out about each other, we put it up on the screen, and I would shut up and say, all right, let's talk about some of these things, and what do we see? What do we hear? And then we implemented the breathing exercises before we go into each lift, and then we do visualization type things before we go into a lift. And whether they admit it or not, like, I can see a difference the way that some of the kids will talk, even to me in a situation, or how they approach or go out to the weight room. Just clearing your head before you go to lift, like, it makes a difference whether they realize it or not.
Yeah. I mean, I love it that some of the stuff you're doing with the question of the week and stuff, that's not really stuff I did. You just take some of my stuff and you're like, here's how I want to implement it, which I love it. And what you're talking about, the breathing and visualization, is something we talked about. I think back to that equation I'm doing with that Ember into Inferno, is the whole point is, like, when you keep putting kids through stuff, or just from their daily life, right, that they already have, they have that stress builds up, right? That anxiety builds up. We know it. We feel it. We all do it. And doing a little bit of mindfulness and do a little bit of breathing is so useful to help kids take a breath, recenter, restart. I mean, and this is something I worked with you that we've talked about. Like, if we breathe and do some mindfulness, 5 minutes of it, you're probably not even doing 5 minutes, probably just a couple minutes before you go. If you do that before every practice, there's all kinds of research that shows kids are more focused, more in tune with their body. They've forgotten all the stuff that was going on during the day, and they're more locked into what they need to do in practice. As you mentioned, it is not 5 minutes wasted. It's a time saver, because you're getting more done with less time with these kids.
And to that point, like, it's funny. One kid sticks out in my head that, like, it's almost like when I was a kid, Dad gave me a screwdriver to tell me to screw the screw in with the screwdriver. It takes forever, man. This is boring, all this other stuff. And then when you go into with a breathing exercise, or you give them a tool that they can use that really makes sense and makes them better, it's like Dad giving me a power drill, and like, man, I can get this screw in here in no time. You know, like, this is great. I'm going to keep listening to this. I want some more of this. And like, man, they just come back hungry for more information. And that locked in piece is critical in just about anything that we're doing, whether it be lifting weights, you know, talking about life or talking about practice. Like, you're giving kids tools that they can take with the rest of their life to go through any situation. And that's kind of our job too, as the high school coaches, is, you know, we're preparing, you know, dads, husbands, all these things, like, forever.
Yeah.
So we want to change with the kids, and, you know, kids are different. Like, hey man, it might be kind of our fault.
Well, we're at least part of it, right?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like,
And I think that what we're talking about is, and I don't want to get into I know that I did it with you guys, and I know, and I've talked about it with another one of my podcasts. If anybody's into this and you're like, what are they talking about with this neuroplasticity? You don't like that. There's a podcast I did, her name. And so if you want to go back and you listen to this, I got a podcast with a woman named Megan Gilmore, and we talked about all this, but we're talking about the benefit of breathing. Yes, it locks them in for practice, but you're actually short-circuiting some of the problems. Like, if a kid or an adult, right, is constantly in a state of stress, right? I talked about, that's one of the things I do in the program. It's making biological changes in our body that are negative, right? That end up being more long-term health issues like cancer, stroke, blood pressure, even things like alcoholism and stuff are all tied to us not stopping and calming down when we need to. So when you're talking about getting kids more focused before practice, yeah, that's a benefit, but we're talking about long-term benefits for their health. And it's also not just for the kids, but it's for people like me and you. And I couldn't say it better. Like, I work with athletes and I work with coaches, but I don't care if any of them go pro.
right.
These are tools I want them to have when they go on to be adults, to know how to calm down, recenter, so they make right decisions for their family, for their job, for their relationships.
Yeah, and that's things they can take with them. And don't get me wrong, like, I want to win games. I want the biggest, strongest, fastest, and whatever. But, you know, at the same time, I'm not afraid to continue to work and build, you know, something even better to go on past that, you know, see the bigger picture of things.
Yeah, I think I have yet to figure out what the right formula is for winning, but I know that the right formula for winning is not just focusing on winning.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Right? Because it just starts to, if we're so results focused, it starts to spin us negative, and we think we're never going to get it. But I think that all these things you're talking about, like, I think they help kids. They help us feel better about ourselves. They help us, you know, be more positive. And if you do those things for long enough, I think it builds a program and a culture that can turn into a winning culture and a program.
Right. And, you know, when you give tools to work through adversity, and, you know, I think that's kind of one of the biggest things of mental toughness anyway, being able to remain calm, breathe, you know, assess the situation, and then now we can communicate together through it. Like, that's going to be a whole lot better than, you know, maybe some of these people's images of the mental toughness of, well, you can take a butt chewing or whatever and still move on. Like, but did you really solve the problem and work through that adversity, that it's not going to come back, or that we're not going to be put back in that situation? You know, like, yeah, I think I don't know, the view is different, and it's very, very helpful and powerful for the kids.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if it's nothing but butt chewing, like you mentioned, I think that's the, you know, if that's just the old school way and there's no love and you know, it's just a butt chewing. I do think that you get two options. I think that kid either, like, starts to hate you.
That's
right?
it.
Or it starts to beat them down and they just start to listen to you and talk about how I must be awful. Right.
Right. And then once you fall into that world, you know, what you surround yourself with outside of that is the same thing. And now you're just, you know, you're digging that hole deeper and deeper and sinking, and you got nobody there that you want to listen to that would at least get your head above water.
Yeah.
Like, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's tough. Man, I love all this stuff. It's been I'm so excited to see how things go for White House football, because you're doing some of this stuff. And it's not, and again, it just wasn't White House football. I mean, we had other coaches in there as well. I think we had some basketball coaches, some softball coaches, stuff like that. And I've talked to a few of them, and they're starting to work on it, doing things to help kids get better rather than just point fingers and say, "Oh, what's wrong with kids?" Right?
Right. And, just
Yeah.
taking time out of your day to listen to how much negativity is around you, like it's
I
it'll
think
open your eyes.
that's one of the best parts. Like even if you go through one of my programs, even if you don't go all in like you have, right? It starts to, it's a recognition piece. Like you're,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute. There's a whole lot. I'm using this negative voice. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And I think once you start to feel that recognition, it's like you can't help but like, if you're a good person, right? If you're a good, if you really want to do what's best,
Right.
You're going to be like, okay, I need to do something about this.
Yeah, I got to make a change or something.
Yeah. All right, Coach. What anything else that I missed? What did I not ask that I should have? Anything else that we didn't talk about?
Man, I think we pretty much hit everything that opened my eyes and really helped me and even our kids so far. It's just like anything, man, stick with it.
Yeah.
Be intentional about the practices that you do and stick with it. I'm not perfect or anything like that. We kind of derail sometimes from our plan. Things happen. But, man, you just always that recognition piece and, being intentional with your players and stuff makes a difference.
Yeah. No, I think so too. I commend you for wanting to lean into it. I love you trusting me to come in and do it and work with everybody. And I'm definitely going to be this fall. I'm definitely going to be a White House Blue Devils football fan, and I'll get there. Yeah, see if you can get me a shirt or something, Coach.
Yeah,
and
we'll get you some swag.
All right, we'll do that. Hey, I sure appreciate you coming on, taking time out of your day, and being able to chat about this stuff. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. We appreciate you and appreciate everything you're doing.
You bet. Thanks, man.
Yes, sir.
You can't make chicken salad out of chicken feathers, or perhaps you've heard it or even said the other version. Regardless, good coaches should not blame a lack of success on the players they get to coach. It's a lame excuse, and I'm sorry if that ruffles your feathers. But it's your job as a coach to develop your players. If your athletes lack skill or mental toughness, it's your responsibility to develop it. But how do you make today's athlete tougher without risking breaking them? Well, Mental Mettle Coaching now offers professional development for coaches, explaining how to do just that. The program is called Ember to Inferno, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. It teaches real tools and tangible methods that are proven to increase the mental health and toughness of athletes. The program is available as an in-person seminar or as virtual small group coaching. Don't wish for mentally tough athletes. Build them. Contact Mental Mettle Coaching today. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview with Coach Hamilton. Hopefully you can see from his demeanor, he's very excited about this program, putting it into place with his athletes, and honestly, just being a better coach, a better human, and developing better humans, and winning some games along the way. And I'm just so proud for all, the idea that I put a lot of time into on how to do this, and to see a coach just soak it up and say, this is good stuff and I want to do this and apply it to my athletes. I take a lot of pride in that, and seeing that come to fruition and having them use it. And I honestly, I would love, if you're an AD, if you're a coach, if you're looking for some professional development. I do some professional development as well for teachers, but this idea of doing this professional development with coaches, it is the times that I go do it, the coaches love it because they don't get their own professional development. And so it's nice. They enjoy it. They get to do this, get to talk about things that they want to talk about. And also they know it's such a need, right? There is such a need out there. We know that kids struggle. We know that kids are not that mentally tough. They can be a little bit soft, and we know that it affects them in the long run. And honestly, let's be 100% honest, it affects our win-loss record. If kids aren't tough, we know we struggle having them take criticism and have them handle losses and learn how to get better because they just want to quit. And they don't handle the coaches well. They don't handle the officials well, the refs well. They don't handle their parents well. They just don't have that growth that we're looking for. But we don't know how to do it. So that a lot of time coaches either one, just complain about it, which does nothing, right? Other than give them their own stress and other things to worry about. Or they're frustrated because they don't know how to deal with it. And yeah, you could lean into it the way that most of us coach the way we were coached. And look, I'm not telling you that there's some really old school coaching that's really good and there's ways to do that. But I think that a lot of times when we see coaches that are really hard on their players, we don't see behind the scenes a lot of times. And we don't know what they're doing and how they're building those kids up and how they're pouring into those kids to be able to add that adversity. If we go back to that equation, I think that if you have a kid, when you see coaches that are really getting hard on kids and they're putting a lot of adversity on those kids, I think it is a given that if they're going to be successful in the long run, they're adding a lot of those kids have a lot of confidence and belief that has been built up in, right? So if the coach is adding a ton of adversity and really getting on them, I can assume that they're believing in that kid in practice, putting a lot of time into and a lot of communication. So it fits this equation here that I got back up on the screen. You can put a kid through a lot of tough adversity and really get on them. But I think that you have to do it in the right way, and they have to have had a little bit of mental toughness built up, right? As I talked with Coach Hamilton, you can't just say, well, kids are soft, and if they don't like it, hit the door. You can, right? You can do that. I don't think it's fair for the kids. I don't think it's fair for your school. I don't think it's fair for our culture, right? You are, as a coach, you're not there for them. You're there for the kids. And if kids are struggling with mental toughness, you need to help them get better at it. And I think this is a way to do it. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox now because I'm here to help. And if you listen to this, you see some of this stuff is pretty cool, contact me, shoot me a message, shoot me an email. You got my number, text me, say, hey, I'd love to you come in and talk to my team, my coaches. If you're an athletic director, I'd love to come in and share this idea. And I'd love to share, eventually start building a network of coaches that understand this idea so that they can share with each other on how to do this. And I think it's something that's possible. It's a dream of mine. It's something I really want to do. So, yeah. So it's been a great episode. I love talking about this stuff. I can do it all day. I can get into this metaphor and geek out about it all day, but we don't have all day, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Once again, if you like any of this stuff, don't keep it for yourself. Share it, share, subscribe, put it out there, and see if you can help others by sharing it. So thanks for the time. I genuinely appreciate you tuning in. So once again, this has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and remember, always forge your metal. Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.